In this video, we're going to be trying to find the third biggest integer in a dataset. That is the third biggest distinct integer in a given dataset, and the data is held in a file called data.txt. So the README says you need to create a method called find third biggest. So we are going to use that name, find third biggest, to find the third biggest integer. It can be assumed the data file only contains positive integers. So I'm going to go across here. First thing I'm going to do actually is I'm going to add another file, which is what I did in the last video. And I'm going to make some test data because you haven't been given any. So here I'm just going to have some numbers there. Okay, so the third biggest value here is 4. Yeah, we've got 3 6s, and somebody might have thought, okay, so 6 is the third biggest, but no, 4 is the fourth largest distinct integer. So I'll be using that. So I'm across at the main.java. Okay, I'm going to start with some declarations. I'm going to start with an array list of integers. I'll call it nums. And so that's a new array list. And I'll use diamond referencing here. And I'm going to have buffered reader. BR is equal to a new buffered reader. And that will be based around a new file reader. Which is pointing at, and I'm going to point it straight at test.txt. And then here I'm going to close the buffered reader. Okay, and it's automatically imported buffered reader, but I'm just going to put a wildcard in there so that it imports everything else. And I'm also going to import java.util library, so it will do my array list as well. I'm going to put a throws IO exception, and so that should be fine here. Now next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to iterate through the data file, and I'm going to add that add to the list. So I'll start off by having a string. I'm going to call it line. And I'm just going to say while, and here I'm going to read the contents of each line, and provided that they are not null, I will add them to the nums list. And I'll make it into an integer, integer.value off. And so that should be fine there. I'm just going to do a bit of testing. I'm going to print out the content of nums. Now here I know that nums is test.txt, so that should be okay. And yeah, we've got the values there, so that's fine. Now I'm going to have an integer called third biggest. I'm going to find is equal to find third biggest. And I'm passing nums into that. And then I'm going to print it out. Okay, so I've done everything there in the main body. Now I need to actually write the method called find biggest. So this will be a public method. It's static because it's standalone. It returns an integer, and it is called find third biggest. In the previous video I mentioned that you should always ensure that you use the same name as is mentioned in the exam question. Okay, and it passes an array list of type integer. As you can see here, it's underlined, and that's because let me just think about one factor. Big, second, third, and I'm going to return third. Okay, and that's fine. And so I'm going to make big equal to -1, and you can do this in one line. Some people don't like it because they think it's a bit messy. Third, and so that's all done there. That's fine. And now I don't have the red underline, and I've got a biggest, a third biggest, biggest, second biggest, and third biggest. Now I'm simply going to iterate through the list. I'll do that, yeah, through the array list. I'll do that using a standard for loop. Start at 0, and provided it is not as big as the size of the list, and I will increment I. So there you go, there's a standard for loop. And so we have to first of all say, and I'm going to start with, I'm just going to get here, I think I'll stick it up here, value. And now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say value is equal to nums.get I. I'm doing that so I don't have to keep typing nums.get I. Okay, I'm now going to write an if-else ladder to try to find the 3 biggest distinct values. And I'm going to do that by making a comparison between value and the biggest value, and if the biggest is if value is greater than the biggest, then big becomes the greatest value. And I'm going to repeat that with an if-else statement. Else if value is greater than second, then we would say that second is equal to value. Okay, however, what I need to consider is the fact that if we encountered two numbers which were the same, in other words, if big held 6 already and a new value was equal to 6, then here this would not be true. Value would not be greater than big, but it would populate into second, and therefore it would overwrite second with the same number. So what we need to say here is if value is not equal to big and value is greater than second. Okay, and that way we will stop the duplicate number being added to the next value down, and so on. So that's the first issue that we've had to deal with here. The next issue is the fact that if big was overwritten by value, what would happen to the previous big? Well, the truth is second should have that. Second should be given the previous big, and third should be given the previous second largest value. And we could say the same thing here, which is that third should be given the second largest here. Finally, I can write else if value is not equal to second and value is greater than third. Then here I can overwrite third with value, and that should be us done. Let's just review the code. If the value is greater than biggest, then what we need to do is we need to replace biggest with value. But before we do that, we need to have a chain of events where we pass the previous second biggest into third, the previous biggest into second, and then eventually overwrite overwrite the biggest with value. Otherwise, if we have got a value which is not bigger than biggest, but it's bigger than second, and it's not equal to big because we don't want to have duplicates, then we can do the chain of events again, where we've replaced second with the new value. Finally, if we have one here which is not bigger than the biggest, not bigger than the second biggest, a value which is bigger than the third biggest, but it's not equal to second, then here we could overwrite. And I think we would have to write, if the value is not equal to big and the value is not equal to second biggest, then we'd overwrite it like that, and that'll be fine. If we didn't do that, we might actually get a biggest value being bled down here, which we would. Let's run that and see if that works. And it should come out with 4, and it has done, and that's fine. Now if I change this to data.text, and in doing so I'm going to comment out this line here that prints out all the numbers, and here I think I'll write in there the third largest integer equals, and I'll concatenate that, run that, and there's a value there, 49988. Okay, I hope you found that useful. A linear method to do that, which I think is reasonably efficient. Thanks for watching.